All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Being Human Church. Before we start talking about climate change today, I wanted to note a couple of things that sort of happen in the world because we were talking about religious discrimination for the last couple of times had come up. One is that a synagogue was attacked in Germany, like somebody literally attacked it with weapons and so on. The other is that Attorney General Bob Barr started attacking secularists, right, and blaming them for our problems. So we can see where these things are sort of bubbling up. But today, we chose to talk a little bit about climate change, right, and what we can do with that. I passed around a sheet last time, got ideas from people about what was on their minds, the different things they were thinking about. And there were paragraphs written on there and all this, and then in one box somebody had just written climate change, like that's it, 2 words. And I looked at that, that at first I'm not going to do that. That's too big a deal. It's too complicated. It's too difficult. And it really is. There's so many different directions we could go. But the more that it just stuck in my head, like this is going to be the defining issue of our time. When the future looks back, I think this is going to be one of the biggest things that they think about, that they connect to. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So first, some sort of facts about what's happening with climate change. I've just got a few of these. There's a ton of these. This is the nature of the problem, right? First is that it is happening quickly, right? The climate has always changed, but this rate of change is much, much faster than it had been before. So 10 of the last 13 years were the warmest years on record. So 10 of the last 13. That's not just like the majority. That's almost all of them, right? There's only 3 that weren't. So that's huge, right? That's huge in terms of that rate. It's human-made. This cause is not natural variations in terms of our orbit and some other things that might cause this. It's clearly human activity that is creating it. We can expect, 2.5 to 10 degrees over the next century, so the next 100 years. Okay, 2.5 doesn't sound like a lot. 10 sounds like a whole bunch. And that's just, I think, just sort of intuitively. When you get past just, what it feels like in the room, to the details underneath, 2.5 is actually a lot. Because we're talking about 1 to 4 feet of sea level rise, that is the sea level coming up 1 to 4 feet, which would be huge for any coastal cities, right? We're going to see massive changes. Humans tend to live on these coasts. Hurricanes are going to get stronger. We're going to see more hurricanes, right? They're going to get stronger, faster. Some species will die out and others will thrive. So we're seeing some species die out. The others that are thriving, by the way, are things like ticks and mosquitoes and jellyfish. So only recently in Nepal, they've had to start spraying for mosquitoes in areas where they have not had mosquito-borne diseases before because the mosquitoes are moving in. So as we're dealing with malaria and other things like that in one place, they're expanding their territory in others. Okay, that's just a quick grab bag. That's just the beginning of the number of problems. It's going to cause all kinds of little problems that then become bigger and bigger. It's going to do it in little ways. It's hard because when we're dealing with the climate, we're dealing with something that isn't obvious, right? A hurricane is obvious. Like, yeah, you can see it. There's the damage. When you're dealing with climate, it's very subtle, right, in the way these changes. They show up in all sorts of different ways. So it's difficult. But we could talk more about those. So what's causing it? What kind of human activity is causing it? Fossil fuels are a big contributor, and those show up in terms of travel, right, in terms of any time that you're meaningful for a plane or a car or transporting things or all of that kind of stuff. And manufacturing as well. Deforestation is a big cause, and livestock farming. So we know that those are some of the largest contributors in different ways. All right. One of the things that is hard about this is global warming is caused by something that is not a toxin or a poison. That is to say, any one person's contribution is not enough, right? If you were the only one emitting, right, what you were emitting, it would be utterly harmless, right? So it's not like some other issues where you've got a poison or something like that. It's going to damage 1 or 2 people, and if you stop it, right, it won't. No, this is only bad because of the overall contribution, not because of any one person's contribution, and not because of any one activity, right? It's not that fossil fuels are terrible, it's that it's too much, right, that's going on. That creates a difficult kind of problem for us to get our heads around and deal with. I think it's something that we're not particularly adapted to do. So what can we do? What can we do? The advice, again, is out there. There's tons of it. I think it's all familiar. You probably know it. Right, 1, eat less meat and dairy. 2, transport less stuff, right? It is not as much, not as far. Travel less, like take fewer trips and all that. I think those things are obvious. We all know them. They're all familiar. They're not a challenge. Well, they are, though, aren't they, when we try to get into it and try and deal with it. So if we think about something like eat less meat, I think, well, okay, so I'm a vegetarian, so hey, I'm winning on that one, right? But I drink alcohol, and that's taking land that could be forest in order to produce something that's not nutritious and not helpful and not so on. I take trips. I've traveled internationally twice in the last year. I mean, that's going to be a significant contributor to climate change. I didn't get an electric car when I bought a new car. But of course, electric cars may not be better depending on whether your electricity is produced with coal. This is hard, right, to look at and say, am I doing what I should do? I did this, I didn't do that, I got this combination, I didn't get that combination. And then we step back, and it gets even more depressing because the big contributors are these industries as a whole, right? It's big industries that are making these kinds of contributions. I'm a little consumer buying, one car or one meal or taking one trip, right? That's not the issue. We need systematic change. And it doesn't look like we're all ready to make that. We're not seeing the political will, the energy there, right? All that direction. So it's complicated, and it gets depressing. I think the reason this gets complicated and depressing is because this is not the kind of problem that we evolved to deal with. So as humanists, one thing we all share is that we need to think about humans as evolved creatures, right? We grew up from apes. We evolved to adapt in certain climates, in certain situations, to deal with certain kinds of things. So we're fairly good with certain kinds of threats, sorts of immediate threats, right? Things that are caused by particular individuals or situations, but not with this kind of global grasping. So to take some examples, 1, we're not unified. We're not bringing all of our desires together. We've got a bunch of different neural systems that do different things. They evolve for different purposes. So we're attracted to salt, fat, and sweet. Like, you want to eat that. That's exciting. That's great. Of course, that's where we get the livestock farming and the deforestation, right, is coming from. But it's immediate, right? You're drawn to that. So even if intellectually maybe I shouldn't be doing that, you've got that biology, right, that pulls you in that direction. We get bored. We need excitement, right? We've got the sort of stimulation that needs to be there. We tend to think of the short term more than the long term, right? Immediate threats, nearby threats, things that are years, months away are difficult to think of sometimes. For me, the afternoon is hard to think about in the morning. You procrastinate, right? You procrastinate. Another feature, right, is we're designed, as Jonathan Haidt looks, to use certain moral categories. So empathy and justice, but also a concern about purity, right? We want to be pure. We want to be innocent. And so one of the things that he looks at is the way that our tendency is to want to look at something as good or bad, right? It's good or evil. You have it or you avoid it. We don't do very well with balance. Right, with something that's kind of moderate, that's in the middle. It's one or the other, right? Purity is something that we're trying to pursue. A third thing is that we're not evolved to be satisfied. We're evolved to be somewhat dissatisfied. So even when we have, right, enough food and enough shelter and a place to, you get agitated, you get bored, your mind runs to different problems. Now you can see where this might be advantageous for a species. Right? This is something that, like, if you don't sit around, you go and you deal with further and further problems. But that means we're constantly, like, upset, looking around, have a hard time being still and resting. So we're not ready for this. Climate change is not the kind of thing we evolved to deal with. So what can we do about it? What can we do about it? What is the thing that we could focus on to make this shift? Interestingly, I think this, when I was doing a little bit of research, I think this was the thing that struck me the most. The most important thing we can do is be happy. All right, so they did some studies. They checked out some people. People who are happy, report themselves to be happier, also report less concern about the environment and say they're less likely to do things in the future. So it sounds like happy people are going to be lazier. They're going to say, I'm happy, I'm not scared, I'm not nervous, I'm fine, I don't have to worry about it when they do that. However, when they dug in deeper, happy people are more likely to have done something than unhappy people. Right? The people who rated themselves as happy said they would do something, but they hadn't actually done anything. Happy people are more likely to sign up, right, to say, I want to get emails about the subject, I want to be involved, I want to go to the meetings. They're more likely to follow through. So even though they say they're less concerned about the environment, and they don't check off that they're as likely to do something in the future, they are actually more likely to do something and to have done something. So the speculation is it works something like this, right? Unhappy people lose their energy by being unhappy. They lose their commitment. They get the negative emotions overwhelm them, and they don't actually follow through, right? They look at the problem, and they say, this is big, and this is scary, and this is terrifying, and they feel the gravity of it, and they get paralyzed by that fear, right? That anxiety, that depression. Whereas when people are happier, they have the energy to do something about it, right? They have the energy to commit. They have the energy to show up to the meeting and to engage. So that's going to be the call to action. That is to say, what do we need to do? One of the things we need to do, aside from the eat less meat, travel less, all of those things that we know about climate change, one of the things we need to do is be happier. So to come back to this idea that we are evolved to be dissatisfied, one of the things we need to do is practice reminding ourselves that we have enough, right? That's a big deal, right, to say we have enough. When you feel bored and agitated and your mind is groping around, right, and trying to say, to make myself happy, I'm going to need this, or I'm going to need that, or I'm going to need something else, remind yourself that you have enough, right? You have enough. There are many people who've lived with a whole lot less and been happy. You have lived during other parts of your life with less and been happy, at least in most cases, most of the time. So you have enough. Second, reject purity for balance, right? You are not going to be innocent and emit no carbon and get rid of this, right, and do this. That you will never meet that kind of category. Don't try to be pure and innocent. Try to find a balance. That's harder, right? It's tougher to say exactly what that balance is. Being satisfied that you have enough can make it easier, right? Rather than running around and saying, okay, I'm innocent because, in my case, I'm innocent because I don't eat meat. I can look and say, well, wait a minute. What other things am I doing? Well, I don't need to feel guilty and terrible because that's going to deactivate me, right? I need to look and say, I can balance this a little better. I can say, okay, maybe I still want to do this, but I can do a little less of that. All right, I can manage it in some way like that. Finally, we need to work to bring ourselves together into a single, unified person. We've got various neurological systems that go in different directions. They're attracted to, excitement. They're attracted to this. They're repulsed by that. They're bouncing in lots of different directions. Making yourself a unified person means working on your habits, right? We've got habits that shape our desires. If we don't consciously try to shape them, we're going to get drawn to the things that we were evolved to pursue, whether that's social status, right, trying to build up that social status, whether it's salt, fat, and sweet, whether it's a little bit of all those things, and we're going to constantly be unhappy because we're going to keep those desires coming up stronger and stronger. So working to unify yourself, to pull yourself together, to build habits of moderation, habits of balance, recognizing that you have enough, realizing that there are other people working on this issue. So not focusing on the people who are failing, right, but the people who are helping. So I think if those sorts of things, we spend more time on those sorts of things, then we have more energy to come back and say, okay, what are we going to do about the policies that need to be in place to affect climate change? What are we going to do about the personal behaviors? What are we going to do about that? So my call to action with climate change is don't get depressed, don't get overwhelmed. Work on being happy, on being satisfied, on saying what I have is enough. And that will give you, I think, the energy to address these problems.